Well, we have David Graves on the line here, and David, I sure appreciate you joining us. I know that you've been with IBC since almost the conception, but if you could kind of fill us in on what your past experience was in your career, and then, when you did come in to join the Rate Lock mission, the Maui mission, and why you did. I'd appreciate it.
Well, certainly, Jeff. It's my pleasure to participate in David. I have the utmost respect for David Toney, professionally and personally. He has been a very active participant in my growth within IBC and assisting me from day one. And for that matter, that's true of all the staff. But in particular, when IBC was in its infancy, it was there were two individuals, and Dave Toney was the man, and he's been just an excellent resource in terms of information, very bright, very brilliant in terms of the way he can conceive of an idea or an upgrade to an existing program that is part and parcel to IBC. And so from my standpoint, it's been a wonderful experience, and I owe in large part a big thank you to David Toney. Prior to meeting David, I was a bank consultant for a half a dozen years, helping member banks increase their penetration in their installment loan portfolios. And after that, because of that, I was exposed to many merchants. The area that we dealt with, in my experience, was the automotive retail industry. And so after I left the company, I formed an insurance agency. And that agency provided insurance products to the retail automobile industry as well as other insured products, what are commonly referred to as back-end products in the retail auto industry. And
wow,
it was during that time that, and because of that experience, that I, through a mutual friend, business acquaintance, that I was introduced to David Toney, and that was how I got involved with IBC. It was a rather steep learning curve because I had been away from banking, close quotes, per se, and certainly what IBC does has a very, important banking aspect to it.
Well, great. Well, I appreciate that background, and it sounds like it was a natural marriage to what your past experience was, helping people lower those interchange costs. I know you picked out, David, a particular account, as we call a case study, to go over here today. And what retail category of merchant was this particular company that you're going to be speaking to today?
Well, it's going to be rather twofold, Jeff. First of all, because of my experience in the auto retail industry or involvement in that industry, that was my first port of call. And so I called on a handful of automobile dealers that I had had a close personal working relationship with, or do, and I realized that this was a kind of a nagging problem for the retail industry, at least the industry that I was focused on, the auto industry. And this provided kind of a reprieve because the credit card portion of payment for services, parts and service in the retail auto industry was becoming almost a 100% mode of payment. And this, of course, was a cost to the retailer, to the automobile dealer, and they had kind of a resigned attitude towards it, that it was probably the cost of doing business. But with the IBC concept, here at last was a solution to an ever-increasing cost that they faced. And I thought it was an exciting concept. I thought that the retail merchant client, in this case an automobile dealer, would be very interested, and I wanted to be a part of it. And so my experience led me first to the auto retail industry.
Okay. Well, rolling with this particular account, and you said there was a multi-location dealership, correct?
Yes, sir. It was.
Okay. Now, so in this case, you didn't have to cold call. You had a prior relationship, and that's what got you in the door, correct?
Absolutely. I called and talked to, in all of these cases, I would talk to the dealer principal and or the controller, and let them know what I was calling about and asking for a few minutes of the time when I could call on them in person and go over the Interchange brokerage company's ideas and solutions and strategies to reduce their interchange expense. And again, all of these people I knew, so none of this was a cold call. They knew me, I knew them, and I'm a firm believer that a warm call, close quotes, works better for me than a cold call.
Great, great. In all cold calls is ultimately the objective is to create warm calls, referrals after the initial cold call sale.
Absolutely. Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed.
Tell me, David, tell me a little bit about this particular sales process. And again, I'm strongly assuming that since he knew you, the perception of you being associated with a bank or a processor was never there. So that never became something that you would have to communicate through to make sure that they knew that you were working directly for retail merchants. And that's how you make your money.
That is correct. There might have been people on staff because ultimately in some of these situations you'd have to deal with an office manager and a controller and what have you, and you had to reassure them that A, you weren't a bank nor were you a processor, but rather a very specially conceived consultancy for this to tackle this problem. And so the important thing was to have a situation like the auto dealer that I'm referring to, or the dealers really that I'm referring to, that knew me and knew where it was that I was coming from, IBC, and what it stood for. Because what you find with all of the clients, and not just auto retail, but all retail, there really is a latent resentment, if you will, and a distrust almost of the processing industry, and our clients feel rather powerless. So by IBC entering the picture, there was a solution that was being provided, and they were able to realize at that point, once they grasped the concept, which was pretty much right away, that it was a win-win for them. It's essential, of course, in these situations that the client feel secure and comfortable because he or she must become a team player also to make this work. But they all grasped immediately that this was something that was going directly to the bottom line. The cost of sale was not involved in these cases, so they got it right away.
Yeah. David, as far as the footwork, the process that you needed to go through to find out if they were currently being treated fairly or unfairly by, industry norms, of course, what did you have to do? How many hoops did you have to jump through? Was it hard? Was it easy? Was it short? Was it long? What indeed was the tools that you used to be able to see if that merchant was being treated fairly? How did you go about that?
Well, first of all, this goes back to the relationship that as an IBC representative we must all have. We must secure a feeling of trust with our prospective client, because they're going to be revealing fiduciary information to us. They're going to have other parties within their organization that are going to be dealing with us, and they have to be very comfortable with the fact that we are indeed who we say we are and will do what we say we will do, and that it will be treated with the utmost of discretion. So not all situations are the same. I recently put a new account on the books that took me 1.5 years of work. So to say that it happens overnight, not necessarily. But in the cases that we're discussing today with, for instance, this particular group of auto dealers, they got it right away. And the process was a matter of explaining to them what IBC was all about, what we intended to do if and when we found a problem in terms of their being treated fairly. So the first thing we needed to do was to gain access to their most recent statements, merchant processing statements. And then it was a matter of doing a rather quick analysis to determine if the conversation should be taken to the next level. And in all of the cases, that was the case. So at that point, secured the statements, secured an agreement, and in all cases but one at that time, they were all for 36 months because the client has a greater share on a 3-year contract, and because they knew that this was a type of business that was endemic, it was going to be, for all intent and purpose, something that was only going to grow, and so they wanted to make sure that they were protected early on and for the long run. And so they, again, appreciated the larger share by going with a 3-year contract. They signed the necessary agreements. They provided the documents and substantiating information that we needed. And then it was submitted to IBC for analysis and an acceptance. In all of these cases, that was the case. They were accepted. And we went to work. We rolled up our sleeves and went to work for them. And over the course of anywhere from 90 to 100 days, the results were rather dramatic. And at first, there would be an incremental change to the benefit of the client, but as the months progressed in that initial trial period, some of these clients, the savings were rather dramatic, in fact.
Well, David, now, before we wrap this up, I'm just curious. They chose the 3-year because that was more money back on their table. Actually, it's a better deal for you also with your commission. We'll get to that in a second. But do you have an idea of what their targeted savings or cost reduction was over that 3-year term?
Oh, sure.
Ballpark.
Oh, sure. About I'm going to say $1,600, $1,700 a month.
Okay, over 3 years, then, right?
And Jeff, you know, I said something a little earlier about a rose is a rose is a rose. It was at that point that I realized that if it worked for a retail automobile dealership, why wouldn't it work for other retailers? A rhetorical question, no doubt, but still. With that, I immediately started putting my feelers out in other areas, and my portfolio now is varied from one end of the spectrum to another. But you ask about a savings. This generated my calling on a large, I'll call it beauty industry client with a dozen locations in schools, salons, what have you, and the same formula, of course, and the only difference now was that the numbers were much bigger. And in that case, this latter case, the savings were better than $5,700 per month.
Wow.
So
wow.
They can be very dramatic, but it's all a matter of relativity, size.
Exactly. And I know you've been here since pretty much the conception of IBC, and I'm assuming you're one of the folks that have reached the legitimate path to 6 figures, in your case a lot more. Is that correct?
Well, I'm working at it, you bet.
Okay. All right. And particular on that dealership itself, what was your projected commission over that term? Do you happen to have a heads up on that?
Sure. That commission, and bear in mind, this was on a 35% at the time split or retention by IBC. I've been able to have a commission of several hundreds of dollars.
Right. Well, David, I sure appreciate your time today, and good luck in the future.
Jeff, it's my pleasure, and again, it's been just a real joy to represent IBC, and it's a tremendous product. It's a tremendous concept. There is virtually a lot of land yet to be tilled, and I would only say in closing that what we've done is provided our prospective clients with a solution to a problem that is only getting more difficult for them to manage. It's virtually and unfathomable to them. They don't have the personnel, the time, nor the experience to deal with interchange, and if they did, they wouldn't know how to go about it. So this is really something that the retail market is yearning for. It's not always easy, but once they grasp it, they're sold.
David, thanks again. I appreciate it.
You're welcome, Jeff. Have a great day.